Do you get up several times a night to go to the bathroom? Do you wear pads or diapers due to bladder leaks? Attain by In Control Medical will stop the leaks and give you back control. Attain is the only FDA-cleared at-home device for the treatment of stress, urge, and mixed urinary incontinence, as well as fecal incontinence. For more information, visit incontrolmedical.com.
So today we have another great conversation, and we literally get so excited, and we always say, I can't believe how much we learn. But today we're speaking to a CEO who has come up with a line of efficacious and natural over-the-counter solutions for some difficult challenges like yeast infections and herpes.
I am so thrilled to speak with Caroline because she has science to back up her claims. And to me, that speaks volumes.
Today is one of those conversations that I know particularly gets Alyssa excited, because we're speaking to a CEO of a health company who focuses on difficult challenges and problems that Alyssa sees every day in her office, like yeast infections and herpes, and has science and clinical evidence to say that it works, that it's not only efficacious, but it's natural. So something like this just always makes your day.
I absolutely agree. And yes, I'm super excited jumping out of my chair because I love the fact that claims are being made based on scientific evidence. And we can also claim a natural product because after all, many, many patients really want to go in the natural direction these days.
The topics that we're talking about today with the CEO of OrganiCare are, we use this word all the time, we're trying to get rid of it, taboo topics like yeast infections and herpes. This is standard fare for you, Alyssa?
Yes.
Would you say a day goes by where you don't have someone who comes in with a yeast infection or herpes?
Never.
Welcome to the Business of the V. Hello, friends and colleagues. I'm Dr. Alyssa Dweck.
And I'm Rachel-Braun Scherl. Each week, we bring you the most fascinating investors, inventors, entrepreneurs, academics, and healthcare practitioners who are making things happen in women's sexual and reproductive health.
If you are a woman, know a woman, have a business, or care about your V health and wellness, fasten your seatbelts and listen in to another informative and inspiring episode.
We are so thrilled to have Caroline Goodner with us today. Caroline's the CEO of OrganiCare, which she will tell you a lot about. It's the maker of FemiClear, and she's on a mission with this company to create all natural and organic OTC healthcare products that are safe, effective, and simply better, which I love. Welcome. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I love this podcast. It's amazing.
Thank you so much. So we've had the chance to talk a little bit before about your journey, but share with us and the listeners how you got here. As we joke, very few people wake up and say, my dream in life is to work near the vagina on products for the vulva, any of those things. So how did you wind up here doing what you're doing with such a clear purpose?
That was my dream in life, but I digress.
Good for you. You knew early on. I guess to be a doctor, you have to know pretty early on too, don't you? So yes, well, I mean, my path has been an entrepreneurial one. This is my fourth company. My first one I started right out of business school. And I guess my first company sort of is tangentially related to sex in that it was a DNA paternity testing company. So when people didn't know for sure who the father was, they would come to us and we would tell them through DNA testing. And so, you know, I've always just enjoyed the entrepreneurial journey. And so I was kind of in that business. Then I had another type of genetics business that was really more geared to research scientists and genotyping and things like that. And then I got into the CPG world with a company called Upspring that was acquired by Reckitt last year. And so we really made products that were more for moms and babies. But again, that vulva vagina is right there in the midst of making babies, right? So then finally, I started this company about 5 years ago, and we started out really in a different space in first aid, oral care, but pretty quickly realized the potential that our base technology has for feminine health issues. And we have a partner in Italy, and they were doing some research with some doctors there. And we learned that, kind of the base substrate that was even that we were working with, that's patent pending, had tremendous efficacy against fungus. So we did some studies and learned that, it was highly effective against yeast infections. We've since done, kind of more studies, which I can get into in a little bit, to learn that it's more effective than, the drugs that are out there on the market, both OTC and prescription. And then, kind of we decided to really focus on our FemiClear brand, which is this first yeast infection treatment was the first product. And then we got into vaginal itch, and then we launched a really breakthrough product last year at the end of 2020 for genital herpes. So if we wanted to, get into more and more, dare I say, taboo topics, herpes seems to be the biggest one so far. And we really want to help address that and help destigmatize.
I can't appreciate this more because, the patients in my office who have a first diagnosis of herpes specifically are devastated on so many levels. Number one, because it's physically incredibly uncomfortable, particularly genital herpes. But number two, because it really is still a very stigmatized infection. How did you land on herpes out of all of the infections out there, other than the fact that it's such an unmet need?
Yeah, we've done a lot of testing, making natural products and coming kind of from more of the traditional medical background. We felt that we needed to overcome the somewhat justified skepticism about natural products actually being efficacious. So we started doing a substantial amount of in vitro lab testing. So, early on looking at bacterial kill rate of our technology-based substrate, then looking at fungus as we were talking about yeast. And then we thought, God, what if it works on viruses? That would be crazy. And what we found is that there was efficacy. And when we reformulated it to be specific for antiviral activity, the testing that we did shows that it kills 99.9% of HSV1 and 2, since both
Right.
of those viruses can cause genital herpes.
So this is clearly over the counter. And, just to edify the audience, HSV1 was always thought to be only oral herpes, HSV2 only genital. They are now totally intertwined. And so it's great to know that this has activity against both.
So one of the interesting and disturbing trends that we're seeing is that there's a measurable decline in condom usage and a measurable increase in sexually transmitted diseases. So it is taboo, but we're in a situation where we're going to have to talk about it more. How do you communicate? We've faced this, and we've spoken to many entrepreneurs who have the message, have the products, have the clinical demonstration, and can't get the message through on the channels that they'd like to, whether they're blocked by advertising standards, disparately applied advertising standards, but different standards. And you've made some real progress in your distribution. What has been your secret sauce? I'm sure you faced some of those challenges. So if you want to share some of those, that would be interesting too, but how you've overcome that to really be running a growing business in many, many different categories that would be considered less than desirable to talk about, except in select groups like this.
Yeah, no, and thank you again for doing this, for having a podcast that focuses on this very intersection of business and vaginal health issues. We've actually not been challenged nearly as much at the distribution level as we have in the media. And so what you're doing is all the more important. But at the distribution level, these major retailers that we're in, like CVS and Walgreens and Walmart, Rite Aid, these retailers understand this is important and underdeveloped white space. I suspect a big reason you guys did this is that women's health issues have just not been addressed because too few women were in positions of power to make the decisions about what's going to get addressed. And so now that that's changing, hopefully it will continue to change. But, the buyers and the retailers know that feminine health care is really important, and that the consumers who make the purchases are largely women, and they care about their own health and they want to feel better. And particularly for conditions like herpes, where there's not a really good solution, the prescription that is the antiviral does absolutely help. And we recommend that patients who have it and have a prescription keep using their prescription and just use the FemiClear ointment as an adjunct therapy that really helps with the symptoms of pain and burning and itching. But in terms of trying to break through the media, it's been a challenge. There have been occasions where, TikTok, great example. They said, we won't allow any advertising on STIs, on any STI. And they didn't have a real good reason for it. We challenged it. I hope they're going to come back and say something different. They have plenty of people on their platform talking about it.
I would love to say they have plenty of people on their platform who are personally experiencing these infections. I mean, herpes, I think, hits 1 in 3 sexually active adults. So come on, right?
Yes, no, absolutely. And so it's kind of, I think, these arcane rules that were probably created decades ago that, continue to think of, us as a puritanical society, and we're not. And we need to move into, this day and age. What I find so strange is that, herpes, by many accounts, is still more stigmatized than HIV. And it's because the HIV community has done a really good job, I think, of helping to destigmatize it, getting celebrities that have it out there in the forefront. So we're hoping that we can help along those lines and really get people talking. What gets talked about gets better. And so that's kind of the basis of our mission behind, the product.
I love that. What gets talked about gets better. And it is amazing that HIV was a disease in our lifetime that was, at some point was a death sentence. And now people can live long, healthy and productive lives, and that we still can't talk about herpes, which should be treated, can be treated. And if it's not treated, has really significant impact. So Alyssa, talk a little bit about the conversations you're having with patients when they come in and you diagnose them with an STI, and the standard protocol, and what are some of the big issues that they're asking you about?
Well, look, I mean, I think herpes is a very distinct STI in the sense that it's treatable, it's manageable, but it is not curable. And that is really bothersome to the general population, of course. It's also transmissible, and in many states, it's the law to alert your partner that you may have this STI. So it comes with a lot of baggage. But what I find is that my patients, they do a lot of research. They want to find out what they can do on their own for treatment and comfort. And I think this is a perfect adjunct for, what we have to offer in our medical arsenal. So I think that's super helpful. And the fact that it's naturally derived is very helpful, because after all, that's the way I feel like my patient population is swaying. They would prefer to use a pharmaceutical if they have to, but go with something over the counter and natural otherwise, or in conjunction. Yeast, similarly, not as stigmatizing, but incredibly common, and certainly very disturbing to day-to-day life if you have an infection. How does your product for yeast compare to the other over-the-counter products? In other words, is it a cure, a treatment, an adjunct, or just something to help with the symptoms?
It is a treatment. It does clear the infection. And we have done quite a bit of testing, in vitro testing on it. We're in the middle of a clinical as well. But the in vitro testing is really interesting, and you probably know this, being a doctor, but there is, similar to antibiotic resistance that a lot of people have heard of, there is antifungal resistance, and you see it nowhere better than in yeast infection. 50% of infections are caused by a yeast called Candida albicans, and 50% of infections are caused by 2 different candidas. And the typical treatment, over-the-counter treatment, is miconazole. And there's also a ticonazole, but miconazole is largely the main one in like Monistat and Lagicam and the private label and all those other brands. It's all the same drug. And we've tested against that drug, and it does not perform well against those other two yeasts. It does pretty well against albicans. So if you're lucky enough to have the yeast infection that it treats fairly well, that's great. But if you fall into the other category, if you find that you're having a chronic or stubborn or very difficult to clear infection, it could be because you have one of those other yeasts, and those typical drugs have, you know, those yeasts have become resistant to that drug, probably because it's been used so commonly.
Yeah, I've absolutely seen that. In fact, I've taken in my office to doing a culture to actually source the strain, and we pick out the glabratas and the other non-albicans sources just to help us with treatment management. And I don't know if it's just the nature of my practice or if this is happening universally, but I'm seeing so many recurrent infections. And this is one of the most frustrating things for both patient and practitioner alike, because we're seeing people over and over for the same thing.
Yeah, and so what's not was what FemiClear does, and we again tested it kills over 99% of all three of those candidas, and they account for like 96% of all infections. So we've done the testing to show that it does work, because the mode of killing the yeast or being antimicrobial is different than typical synthetic drugs.
So here's today's hot flash, Rachel, which blew me away because I got this right off the CDC website. First of all, herpes is a super common infection. 1 in 5 in the US have been exposed to an STI, and $16 billion goes towards direct medical expenses when it comes to sexually transmitted diseases. 91 million of that towards herpes type 2. Shocking.
Every woman needs a strong, healthy pelvic floor. Intensity by In Control Medical is an automatic pelvic floor exerciser with a kick. Intensity tightens and tones your pelvic floor and delivers a strong, intimate response. Intensity, the one device every woman needs. For more information, visit incontrolmedical.com.
What's so interesting is you talk about the different strains, and in my experience, you know, the average consumer would not know which strain she has, which bacteria caused her infection. So the idea that this covers all of them is a benefit she didn't even know potentially she was looking for. One of the things I'm really interested in is, you know, natural is the craze, clean is the craze, everybody's interested, and we've made so much progress. Historically, natural meant less efficacious. How are you communicating natural and clinically proven in a way that is meaningful to your buyers and doesn't feel contradictory?
Yeah, we're trying to always lead with efficacy, because as nice as natural is, you know, unless you're just hardcore and you're willing to suffer through an infection that might not clear in favor of natural, most people want to know that it's going to work. Especially, I mean, if you're walking around with a yeast infection or if you've got a herpes outbreak, you want relief. And so we lead with the efficacy statement and messaging. And then we say, and by the way, it's got only natural ingredients. And another thing I should say is a lot of quote unquote natural products have a natural active ingredient, but they have all kinds of stuff in the inactive list. You know, FemiClear does not. We only have natural ingredients in our products.
Which is one of the reasons natural as a descriptor often is unclear and means different things depending on who's talking about it.
Well, I like safe and effective, because to me, when I think of natural, which is great, I also think of things like cyanide or arsenic, which are natural, and that's not good. Are you providing education for your consumers? I mean, people are really thirsty for knowledge when it comes to both of these infections and just general, you know, vaginal health.
We are, but we've done some. We need to do better. We are beefing up our website, for example. We'll soon be launching a D2C site, even though our main sales channel is through brick and mortar retailers. The reason really for that is because of education. We also have engaged an advisory board. So we have a couple of OBGYNs who specialize in this area as you do. And so we're kind of going heavier on the clinical side, doing additional testing, and like trying to relay that in a very colloquial, easy to understand manner for consumers through the website and other means.
Yeah, we've talked about this so much that, we'll speak in the US, but it has impact in the rest of the world, that in the gap or the void left by either no sex education or insufficient sex education, so many companies like yours, as well as physicians like Alyssa, are stepping in to provide that. And I find it fascinating because you said, what you talk about, you'll fix. What you understand and learn about, you'll treat. And one of the big challenges so many companies have in this space is you're first trying to get people aware of what it is that's going on, then give them the range of options. And I think the yeast infection example is a perfect one. Why wouldn't I want to know that information so that I could find the product or set of products or treatment that would be the most efficacious for the strain or strains that I have? And it's companies like yours that are stepping in and saying, this is information you need to know. And if no one else is doing it, we're going to do it in a way that it's digestible.
And that's what we hope. And we hope we can do it in a way that gets noticed, because first you must get noticed. And so we want to be fun enough to get noticed and capture people's attention. But then, we're going to work at getting that, educational message out about why, this product is more likely to clear a stubborn yeast infection. If you have chronic infections, that is a message that I think we are going to be doing a better job of getting out, so that consumers can understand. Because a lot of them are just kind of throwing up their hands and not knowing what to do, and they just keep trying different things, and it's not working.
You have no idea what they're trying.
Well, I'm curious for both of you, from the business perspective and from the healthcare practitioner perspective. What do you define as chronic? Someone who suffers from either chronic yeast infections or chronic STIs. What is that? How intrusive is that? How many times a year are you seeing things like that?
So from a medical standpoint, herpes is considered recurrent and reasonable to treat on a prophylactic basis with pharmaceutical meds with more than 6 to 9 outbreaks per year. I don't know any patient of mine who's willing to even think of tolerating that. That's a lot. That's very intrusive in the life, day-to-day life. As far as yeast, I think probably 2 to 3 in 6 months is considered recurrent, but many women will notice this cyclically, and there are so many correctable risk factors in the lifestyle, whether it's sitting in a wet bathing suit or not getting out of your wet workout clothes or having a diet high in sugar or alcohol that might feed a yeast infection, but having something to treat the symptoms efficaciously that's over the counter is great.
So Caroline, when you're talking to customers, and one of the things I love about being in this space is you have the most amazing conversations with satisfied users. What are some of the things that you've heard from people? I'm sure when they find this, for some users, they think they, died and went to heaven, if you'll excuse the expression. What can you share some of the testimonials that you've gotten from customers who find you?
Yes, for sure. So on the yeast side, hearing from those patients who have been trying something and they've just not been able to clear their infection, and they're so grateful, those are the best ones to hear, because, they've been really, really struggling. The one thing that we also find is that people who are having a first infection, or maybe this is only, the second infection they've ever had, they don't know what to expect. And one of the facts about yeast infections is, if you let it go and you don't treat it early, it can really burn when you treat it. And because it just creates a vaginal wall that's micro fissures, like tiny cuts. And so it hurts. So we encourage people to treat early. That's one of the things that we're also trying to educate on, is as soon as you see something unusual going on down there and you suspect an infection, if you've never been diagnosed, go to your doctor.
I was just going to add that, as we all cross our legs hearing about these symptoms, but yes, absolutely, never had one.
Do not guess at it, but if a doctor has diagnosed you and you know what it is, you can go get treatment, but get treatment early. On the herpes side, we have never heard so many heart-wrenching, just grateful, responses. And I'll tell you, I think a big reason the herpes response is so huge is, number one, it's the first thing available OTC that is fully adjunct therapy to the antiviral. And the reason that is the antiviral is just an oral pill. It doesn't do much for, kind of the topical site of the outbreak. So it really is painful. Some women have to go to the bathroom in a bathtub.
Oh, we prescribed major analgesia for people who have, especially the first outbreak, which is typically the worst.
And what we've learned from our consumer research is that they're trying to cobble together different things like, cortisone 10 or, aspirin or, even, different antibiotics, things that aren't really going to be very effective, and they're not getting good results. So when they try this, and they say, and I mean, I have data, over 90% of people had less pain, burning, and itching. Over 80% of people had a shortened duration of their outbreak.
Wow.
And over 50% of people, when used at the very first tingle, because people with herpes can tell when an outbreak's coming on, didn't even get a blister that formed. So, it's really strong data. And what we're seeing in our reviews is that, people are very happy and grateful for it.
Do you have any data on transmission? I'm sorry to interrupt, from, with partners, or is that something you're not looking at this time?
We don't have any data on it, and I wouldn't venture to say that there could be anything. Be safe, use a condom.
So one of the interesting things about the way you've launched the business is, as you said, you started bricks and mortar, and not all, but a large percentage of companies in this space start with D2C and then figure out how to parlay that into retail distribution. You chose to start the other way. What went into that decision, and how long did it take you to break through till you had retail distribution?
Yeah, I think we did it that way because we could. We were lucky and went. I think it was great timing, right type of product, right time. Consumers, like you said, demand natural, and and if it's natural and proven effective, it's really addressing both sides of the consumer demand. And so, the buyers kind of got it right away. I guess we did a pretty good job of communicating what the products offer, and we had the data to support it. So, a natural company bringing actual science, third-party independently proven science was a good combination. So we actually went practically full chain in most of the retailers that we went into right away. So, there's challenges associated with that, being an unknown brand with all this distribution. So we're trying to grapple with those, but it's a nice problem to have.
Well, as these products become more mainstream, what are some of the retailers that were the early adopters of your line?
CVS was very early on. We also had some regionals that were early on that are known to be pretty progressive, like H-E-B and Wegmans. But CVS was one of the first and a great partner. Walgreens also got on board. Walmart is a terrific partner. So, they all seem to be, really getting it and knowing that this is a great opportunity.
What's next in your pipeline? I mean, you've got the whole V covered, so I'm so curious what else you're interested in.
Yeah, well, we're not sure we do have the whole V covered, so we want to keep working on the V. But in those, especially these two areas of herpes and yeast, we think there's more to be done. And so we're working on some other innovations that are different than just the topical or intravaginal treatment. And so we're going to be coming out with those in early 2022. So we're super excited about that. We want to kind of address the whole problem in a more thorough way. And then we're also looking at other, vaginal conditions that aren't yet addressed very well through OTC options.
And will you look to use the same technology, or much more the same combination of it's natural and efficacious, or efficacious and natural?
That is those two things we require, natural and efficacious. So that's kind of a hallmark of OrganiCare. And also the FemiClear brand, and so those two things are the must-haves. But the delivery system doesn't have to be the basic substrate that we use in all of our products today. We may do other things.
Fantastic. I can't wait to see what's coming down the pike, and I'm sure my patients will benefit greatly.
Oh, good. Oh, yeah. If you want samples, I'll send you some samples.
Well, this is fascinating. And like, as Rachel notes, right up my alley. I absolutely love this conversation. And thank you so much for sharing your journey, your story. And I think I got some really helpful hints for my practice.
Well, this is really so literally up our alley. When we talk about the idea for this podcast was the intersection of what Alyssa hears in her office, unmet needs, gynecological concerns, unanswered questions, and the business is being created to respond. So the fact that you did both, you started with the science and then crafted a set of offerings that will work for people in Alyssa's office as well as for people in the aisles of CVS is really exciting. So congratulations on your amazing success, and we will be cheering you on, and no doubt you'll continue to raise the roof in this category.
Well, let's look at all the science behind this. I love it.
Thank you guys so much. This was just so much fun, and you guys are awesome hosts, and I love what you're doing.
Don't forget, subscribe to our podcast at businessofthev.com for the latest trends and trendsetters in women's health and business.